In this video, I'm going to show you how I made my song Break On Through, which is out now on Apple Music, Spotify, etc. I'm going to dive into my Ableton Live file and show you all of my dirtiest, darkest mixdown secrets, including audio mastering as well. So like and subscribe and let's get into it. So here is the Ableton Live file, and I'll show you each instrument, kind of how I group things, how I organize things, and this is kind of my general pattern for how I organize my channels. So I'll have one main drums group, a main kick sound, and then a snare. So let's solo that out first. So you can see that's a pretty basic drum pattern. I didn't want a whole lot to be going on with the percussion necessarily with the kick and the snare. I wanted that just to be pretty punchy so you can hear how it sounds in the mix. So it's super clean, you know, precise. I didn't add almost any effects to the drums. So on the individual channels, I'm on the kick drum now, I added an EQ8 and I took out a lot of the kind of mid frequencies. And I did the same around the snare, except I EQ'd, I put a high pass filter on the lower frequencies starting at 100 Hertz to wipe out, you know, just lower stuff that might create a little too much rumble for a snare drum. And I'm not a huge fan, especially recently, of putting reverb on my percussion instruments, especially my kick and my snare. So you can see on the drums group here, really all I did was I added a little bit of an overdrive to kind of give it a little bit of a crunch. And then I put this plugin called Camel Crusher, which is an amazing and free plugin just for like beefing up sounds and give things a little more presence. Camel Crusher is just, I don't know, it's just so easy. And I like that it looks kind of old school and it works with 64-bit Ableton Live. Usually under the drums, the kick and the snare, I'll have a main sub bass line. And this is actually a bounced out version of a KORG Gadget plugin called Memphis. Memphis is basically an MS-20, except a KORG Gadget version of that, and that's included with the KORG Gadget plugins for Mac. A little expensive, $200, but I use them all the time. They sound fantastic, and I used other gadgets in the making of this song. I love the sound of the MS-20, and the Memphis gadget is so close to the MS-20. So what I did is I made a MIDI file, the sub bass, outputted it, it's pretty basic. It changes a little bit here. So on the sub bass channel, there was a sidechain compressor for both the kick and the snare using the drums group. That's just kind of like a general tip on how to get a cleaner sound with drums. If you're having trouble with like separating the kick and the snare from the rest of the stuff going on in your song, I think the quick way to do it is just by adding a compressor to that channel that you want to duck down whenever the kick and the snare hit. Search for a compressor, go like that, and then you add it, and then you press sidechain, and then audio from drums. So that's the bass. And then next is a channel just called Perc, which is short for percussion. Hi-hats, I have a closed hi-hat here, this kind of zippy sound. And then there's this like boingy sound that comes in, a little bit of a old school sounding snare, and then this like ride cymbal that happens here and there. I usually have these kind of sounds, you know, pretty minimal in the mix because I don't really like huge hi-hats and stuff most of the time, but in this one, I want it to be more like adding texture, adding a little bit of interest and rhythm. Let's just solo out the percussion and the drums so you can hear how that sounds together. Pretty simple, right? I haven't been adding almost any reverb to anything, including drums, especially drums, because I like a really clean and crisp drum sound. And the same thing goes for the percussion. I did want a little bit of like an 8-bit, you know, erosion sounding sound, so I added that erosion plugin to the percussion. And then I also EQ'd out a lot of the bass frequencies, and then I panned it kind of 23% to the right and left using this effects chain here that basically is kind of like a widening effects chain. So that's percussion. And then next up is a big group called vocals and noise. So this is where a lot of like shh and whooshing. There's also like the vocals from the song. and then little samples of me crying and all kinds of fun stuff. And if you want to reference like where these vocal samples come from, why I put them in there, I have another video where I talk about like the concept behind the song. I added my own kind of 3-part harmony vocals here. A little bit of chorus, some phaser, EQ'd out a lot of the bass frequencies of my voice, and then I have an auto filter with automation. So that choir pad sound right there, it almost sounds like, you know, an accordion or something, but that's actually a built-in Ableton plugin just called Analog. There's a preset called Spacious Choir that I really liked. It sounded almost like robot voices. And then there was another plugin, I think it was the same Spacious Choir Analog plugin preset. When you double that on top of the vocals that I recorded with my mouth, it sounds like this. Breath sample. That one's a little pitched down there, and I added a little bit of that breath here and there just to give a little more texture. Then there's a little bit of like noise going on here, just like white noise. Some white noise risers, just to add a little more drama. The bass sound right here is something I recorded on a analog MS-20 Mini to give it a little extra kind of rawness and a little bit of that texture. Which is really subtle, but when you couple that with the sub bass, it sounds like this. I like that kind of fuzziness, adds a little bit of character to the bass notes. And then the final thing in that vocal and noise channel are these panning machine noises. I'll just play like the entire group that is called vocals and noise. On that main vocals and noise channel, I filtered out even more sub frequencies, and I also added that Camel Crusher. And then the other huge group of channels is called synths. Added another drum compressor, sidechain compressor onto that entire group. So anytime the drums hit the kick or the snare, you'll hear a ducked down compression on the synthesizers. And then you hear a cleaner kick and snare, which I just particularly like. And then I have another EQ on the entire group where it just filters out some of those sub frequencies again. The reason I do that is because I want the sub bass and the kick and the snare to be really punchy, not muddy at all. So that kind of cleans up those low end frequencies. In one of the synths, you'll see this channel called Mouth Synth. And this is actually me singing. I added a chorus, a little flanger, and then a limiter to it, and took out a lot of the sub frequencies, almost everything here. Kind of weird, kind of wonky, but when you play it against the rest of the song, it sounds like this. So it kind of breaks up the synthesized sound of, you know, just like plugins and stuff. It gives it a little bit more of an organic and kind of weird old radio kind of feel. And then there's a channel called MS-20 High. This is a synth that I recorded on the actual MS-20 Mini, the analog version. The rest of these synths are actually just MIDI, and they're all KORG Gadget. There's this arcade lead. and that's this Kamata 4-bit plugin from KORG Gadget. I love it. It has this visual interface that's amazing, and it just sounds so good. And I just loved the way that sounded with the MS-20 Mini. Layered together, it just sounds like kind of strange and wobbly and weird. And then throughout the song, there's like this subtle bell. It has this almost like horror movie feel for me, but also this like lullaby texture to it. There's an arpeggiated 8-bit sound. And that plugin is a Kingston plugin, also a KORG Gadget. That's that one part where all of the instruments just kind of fall out, and it's just the drums and then this and then the bass. I went through so many revisions of this song, like probably over 100, just to get to this one. And I just realized that the more I added, the less it sounded cool. So I actually ended up taking away a lot of stuff instead of adding it. And that's generally the principle I've been trying to find. And, you know, especially if a mix down is very muddy or just sounds weird or something, it's usually because there's too much stuff going on. And then there are more arpeggiated synths. Added a little bit of phaser, so it gives it this like you're landing on the moon kind of panning. You can hear it kind of bouncing around from left to right. And then there's a harpsichord sounding sound. And I'll add that kind of other when they're layered on top of each other, it kind of obscures what kind of synths were used, and also it gives a little bit of depth. And then there is one more synth, which is just a pad. Using the Phoenix KORG Gadget. I didn't even add almost any effects to it. I just love the way it sounds built in. So all of that stuff in the synths group, when you put it all together, sounds like this. Then I'll add the vocals. That took so long to get down to that point. And again, I just deleted so much stuff that I was like, why is this even in here? And my general rule is like, if I can't hear it in the mix, just delete it. If it's not adding anything interesting to the mix, delete it. And the final thing that I added are just these boom noises. I love that sound. I've been using that sound for years, probably for like almost 10 years. You can hear it in so many of my songs. And then there's also, of course, my Ben Aqua DJ tag. And fun fact, that's actually a sample from a Bollywood song from the 80s. So when you combine all that stuff together, it sounds like this. Solo out the drums you can hear in real time. Then I'll add the sub bass. There's the bass. I'll add the percussion back in. And then here's the vocals and the noise. And here are the synths. There a little bit late, but you get the idea. So that is how I made this song, but there's one more step, the audio mastering part. This is the final kiss of depth and life that you give to the song. So here's how I master stuff. This is my dirty little secret to it, but it's really not super complicated. I have a utility plugin on here with a gain of 23 decibels, which is pretty drastic because I mix everything, super low, minus 33 dB. I don't know why I do it this low, minus 45. I think mixing quiet allows me to have more headroom later when I'm mastering, so I can bring it all up back in kind of post-production, bring out all the juicy details. I have a general EQ8 going on the master that's set to mode mid-side, so I can kind of pump up and take away some of the stuff in the middle. And then on the sides, I take away a lot of the sub frequencies over here. Let's go into Ozone where I'll show you how I actually mastered it. So I don't even remember. I think I had like a drum and bass track as a reference in this match EQ part of Ozone. So I captured that. Then I captured a bit of my song, and I have the matching EQ to that drum and bass song to about 41%. I have the imager going on the mid and a little bit of the kind of mid highs and then more on the highs. And the imager really just spreads out certain frequencies that I want to be a little more pronounced and a little more interesting in the stereo image of the song. And then on top of that, I have the vintage limiter. And then the final touch is the maximizer. This is the general compressor that will bring all of your audio levels up to that commercial standard or whatever you want to call it. When I just play it all together, what I'm looking for when I'm on this maximizer, the final step of the compression, I'm looking for that number that comes in around here to be at maximum minus 6 dB. I think the highest it went was minus 5.7 or something. So I just adjust this threshold. I'll take it down until it gets about minus 6. To me, it just sounds like that's about what the commercial level is in terms of taking down the threshold. And I use IRC4 Modern for the mode of the maximizer in Ozone. I just think it sounds the cleanest, and that's my secret on how I master things. So that's really it. That's the entire song. I'm really proud of how the song came out. It sounds nice and clean. It has a lot of character. It has the moodiness that I want. It kind of takes its time with the melody. It builds. It has unpredictable moments. So be sure to listen to it on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff. So there you go. Now you have all of my dirtiest mixdown and mastering secrets. I hope this video was edutational for you. I hope you learned a little something. And if you like this type of content, drop me a comment below. If you have any questions for me about audio mixdowns or audio mastering, leave those in the comments as well. I hope you found this useful. Thank you so much for joining me today. Add me on Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.